I watched through my kitchen window as someone loaded my neatly stacked firewood into the back of a silver pickup truck, and my blood pressure shot through the roof when I recognized the baseball cap and that ridiculous red jacket belonging to Randy Morrison, president of our homeowners association. My name is Ethan Lancaster, and I had just spent 3 entire weekends in October splitting and stacking 2 full cords of oak and maple on my property in Asheville, North Carolina. The work had left my hands blistered and my back aching, but I took pride in preparing for the winter months ahead. My cabin-style home sat on the edge of Pinecrest Estates, a community of about 70 homes nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and heating with wood was both economical and necessary when the power went out during ice storms. It was 7 in the morning on a Tuesday in early November, and I had only stepped inside for 5 minutes to grab my coffee. Now I stood there, mug frozen halfway to my lips, watching Randy make multiple trips from my woodpile to his truck. The sheer audacity of it made me question whether I was still asleep and having some bizarre nightmare. I set down my coffee and walked straight out my back door, not bothering with a jacket despite the crisp mountain air. My breath formed clouds as I crossed my yard, my boots crunching through frost-covered grass. Randy had his back to me, arms loaded with split oak. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" I called out, my voice carrying across the quiet morning. Randy spun around so fast, he nearly dropped the firewood. His weathered face went pale, then quickly flushed red. He was in his mid-50s, with a gut that hung over his belt and thinning gray hair under that baseball cap. For a moment, he just stood there with his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "Ethan, I did not realize you were home," he finally stammered. "Clearly, that does not answer my question. Why are you stealing my firewood?" He straightened up, attempting to recover some dignity, and that familiar condescending expression I had seen at too many HOA meetings settled onto his face. Stealing is a strong word. I was confiscating non-compliant materials. I stared at him in disbelief. Non-compliant materials. "It is firewood, Randy. Firewood that I cut and split myself, on my own property. According to HOA bylaws section 12, subsection 4, no homeowner may store unsightly materials visible from common areas or neighboring properties. Your woodpile is an eyesore and violates community standards." My woodpile is behind my house, barely visible from anywhere, and I have been stacking wood in the same spot for the 3 years I have lived here. You have never said a word about it before. Randy shifted his weight, and I noticed he would not quite meet my eyes. "Well, we are cracking down on violations. Several residents have complained." "Name one." "That is confidential, because they do not exist. You know what I think? I think you saw an opportunity to steal firewood and tried to justify it with made-up HOA nonsense." His face darkened. "Now you listen here, Ethan. As HOA president, I have the authority to enforce community standards. If you have a problem with that, you can file a complaint at the next board meeting. Meanwhile, this wood is being removed from your property, over my dead body." I stepped between Randy and his truck. "Put back every single piece, or I am calling the police right now." For a long moment, we stood there in a standoff. Randy's jaw worked back and forth, and I could practically see the calculations running through his head. He was trying to decide if I was bluffing, whether he could talk his way out of this, or if he should just cut his losses. "You are making a big mistake," he said finally. "You do not want to make an enemy of the HOA. Randy, you just tried to steal my firewood. I am pretty sure we are already past the point of being friends. Now put it back, or I am calling 911. I pulled my phone from my pocket and held it up. Randy glared at me, but he must have realized I was serious. With exaggerated movements meant to show how put out he was, he started carrying the wood back to my pile. Each trip was accompanied by heavy sighs and muttered complaints I could not quite make out, but could guess the general content of. The whole process took about 20 minutes. I stood there the entire time, arms crossed, making sure every piece made it back to where it belonged. When Randy finally finished, he jabbed a finger in my direction. "This is not over. You are in violation and the HOA will be taking further action. You do that, and Randy, stay off my property. If I catch you back here, I will not ask questions first." He stomped to his truck, climbed in with difficulty given his size, and peeled out of my driveway with enough force to spray gravel. I watched until he disappeared down the road, then walked over to inspect my woodpile. Everything seemed to be accounted for, though it was no longer as neatly stacked as it had been before Randy's little visit. Back inside, I reheated my coffee and sat down at my kitchen table. My hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, and my mind was racing. Randy Morrison had always been a pain during HOA meetings, obsessed with petty rules and regulations that seemed designed more to exercise power than to actually improve the community. But this was different. This was theft, plain and simple, regardless of how he tried to dress it up with HOA justifications. I pulled out my laptop and started researching. Pinecrest Estates had been established in 2008, and like most HOA communities, we had bylaws and covenants. I had read through them when I bought my house, but that had been 3 years ago, and I had not looked at them since. Time to refresh my memory. I found the digital copy I had saved and started searching. Section 12 covered property maintenance and aesthetic standards, but when I found subsection 4, it was about lawn care and exterior paint colors. There was nothing about firewood storage. Absolutely nothing. Interesting. I kept reading, going through the entire document. The closest thing I could find was a general statement about not creating nuisances or storing materials in a way that could be considered abandonment or junk collection. But firewood stacked neatly for home heating purposes. That was a stretch by any interpretation. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from my neighbor, Pete Daniels, who lived 2 houses down. "Did I just see Randy leaving your place with an empty truck? He was loaded down when he drove past my house earlier." I called Pete instead of texting back. He picked up on the first ring. "You would not believe what just happened," I said, and launched into the full story. Pete listened, interrupting occasionally with exclamations of disbelief. He was in his early 40s, worked from home as a software developer, and had been in Pinecrest Estates since the community was built. He knew Randy better than most. "That is absolutely ridiculous," Pete said when I finished. "I mean, Randy has always been on a power trip, but outright theft. That is a new low even for him." He tried to justify it with Section 12, subsection 4 of the bylaws, the paint color section. "That does not have anything to do with firewood." "I know. I just checked. Pete, what do you know about complaints being filed against me? Randy claimed residents have been complaining about my woodpile." Pete was quiet for a moment. "I have not heard anything, and you know how gossip spreads around here. If people were complaining about you, I would have caught wind of it. My guess, he made it up. That is what I figured. So what are you going to do? Good question." I could let it go, write it off as Randy being Randy and hope it did not happen again. But that stuck in my craw. The man had literally tried to steal from me, and his parting threat suggested he was not done making my life difficult. "I think I need to go to the next HOA meeting and address this officially," I said. "That is 3 weeks away. The next one is not until December. Then I will request an emergency meeting, or I will file a formal complaint. There has to be some process for this." Pete hesitated. Ethan, you know how these things go. Randy runs the board. His wife Barbara is the treasurer and Carl Stevens, the vice president, goes along with whatever Randy says. You are going to be outvoted before you even start. Probably. But I want it on record. What he did was wrong, and I am not going to just pretend it did not happen. I support you, man. Let me know if you need anything. I will back you up. We ended the call, and I spent the next hour drafting a formal complaint letter to the HOA board. I detailed exactly what had happened, the time, what Randy had said, and the fact that I could find no bylaw that actually supported his actions. I kept it professional and factual, resisting the urge to add editorial comments about Randy's character, though it was tempting. I sent the letter via email to all 3 board members and requested a meeting to discuss the incident. Then, I forwarded a copy to my own email and printed one for my records. If this was going to turn into a battle, I wanted documentation of everything. The response came faster than I expected. By noon, I had an email from Barbara Morrison, Randy's wife. She was in her early 50s, with helmet-like blonde hair she got done religiously every Thursday at the salon in town, and she had a voice that could cut glass when she wanted it to. The email was terse and formal. Your complaint has been received and will be reviewed by the board. You will be notified of our decision within 2 weeks per HOA bylaws. 2 weeks. They were going to drag this out, probably hoping I would lose interest or forget about it. Fat chance. I decided to take a walk around the neighborhood to clear my head. Pinecrest Estates was genuinely beautiful, especially in autumn with the mountains ablaze in reds, oranges, and golds. The homes were well maintained, a mix of cabin-style places like mine and more traditional suburban houses. Lots ranged from half an acre to 2 acres, giving everyone decent space and privacy. As I walked, I ran into Jennifer Hughes, another neighbor who lived at the end of my street. She was in her late 30s, a nurse who worked night shifts at the hospital in Asheville. She was out checking her mailbox, still in her scrubs. "Hey, Ethan, how are you doing?" she called out. "I have had better mornings. You got a minute?" She walked over, and I gave her the abbreviated version of the Firewood incident. Her expression went from curious to shocked to angry. "He did what? That is insane. Your woodpile is not bothering anyone." "That is what I thought. Have you heard anyone complaining about it?" Jennifer shook her head emphatically. "Not a word. And trust me, I hear everything. You know how it is when I am out doing yard work. People stop to chat. If there was gossip about you, I would know." That made 3 people, including me, who had heard nothing about complaints. Randy's story was looking more fabricated by the minute. "He has been worse lately," Jennifer continued. "The HOA, I mean. Randy sent me a violation notice last month because my house numbers were the wrong shade of bronze. Can you believe that? Bronze versus antique bronze. I had to replace them. That is ridiculous. Tell me about it." "Cost me $40 and a trip to the hardware store for something that looks exactly the same. But you know Randy. He loves finding violations. I think it makes him feel important." We talked for a few more minutes before Jennifer headed inside to sleep before her next shift. I continued my walk, but my mind was churning. If Randy was harassing other residents with petty violations, maybe I was not the only one fed up with his behavior. Maybe there were others who would support pushing back against him. Over the next 2 days, I made it my mission to talk to as many neighbors as possible. I kept it casual, just mentioning what had happened and gauging reactions. What I found was enlightening. Randy had sent violation notices to at least a dozen homes in the past 6 months. Most were for incredibly minor things. Grass slightly too long, a garden hose left visible from the street, Halloween decorations still up 2 days after the holiday. People had been paying the small fines or fixing the violations because it seemed easier than fighting the HOA. But the story that really got my attention came from Margaret and Tom Riley, an elderly couple who lived 3 streets over. They had been in Pinecrest Estates for 15 years, long before Randy had become HOA president. "He tried to fine us $500, Margaret told me, her voice still indignant at the memory. "Said our mailbox was not regulation height. Never mind that it has been the same height for 15 years and met code when we installed it." "Did you pay it?" I asked. Tom shook his head. "We threatened to get a lawyer involved." Suddenly, Randy backed down and said there had been a mistake, but the stress of it all was not good for Margaret's blood pressure. "There has to be something we can do about him," Margaret said. "He is on a power trip, and it is getting worse." Before he became president 4 years ago, the HOA was actually pleasant. We focused on organizing community events and maintaining the common areas. Now it is just violations and fines and threats. "Who else is on the board besides Randy and Barbara?" I asked. "Carl Stevens is the vice president, but he just goes along with whatever Randy wants. And then there is Linda Patterson. She is the secretary. She is actually reasonable, but she is just 1 vote. That gave me an idea. If Linda was reasonable, maybe she would be willing to listen to concerns about Randy's behavior. It was worth a shot. I found Linda's address in the HOA directory and decided to visit her that evening. She lived in a 2-story colonial on the north side of the development, with a beautifully maintained garden even this late in the season. Linda answered the door looking surprised to see me. She was in her early 60s, with short gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She had the look of a retired teacher, which it turned out she was. "Ethan Lancaster, right? From Cedar Pine Drive," she said. "That is right. I am sorry to drop by unannounced, but I was hoping I could talk to you about the HOA for a few minutes." She hesitated, then stepped back. "Come on in. I just made tea if you would like some." Her home was cozy and filled with bookshelves. We sat in her living room and I explained what had happened with Randy and the firewood. Unlike the email response from Barbara, Linda's reaction was immediate and genuine. "He did what?" "Ethan, that is completely inappropriate. There is nothing in our bylaws about firewood storage, and even if there were, the proper procedure would be to send you a notice first, not to just take your property." "That is what I thought. Linda, can I be honest with you, please? I have been talking to neighbors, and it seems like Randy has been on a rampage with violations lately. Petty stuff, things that either are not really violations or are so minor they should not matter. People are unhappy but feel like they cannot do anything about it." Linda sighed and set down her teacup. "I have noticed. I have tried to push back in board meetings, but Randy and Barbara vote together, and Carl always sides with them. I am outvoted every time. What would it take to remove Randy as president?" "A vote of no confidence from the homeowners. You would need to call a special meeting and get a majority of residents to vote for his removal. It is in the bylaws, but it has never been done here." "How many residents would need to attend?" "We have 70 homes, so you would need at least 36 votes to constitute a majority." But honestly, getting people to show up is the hard part. Most homeowners do not want to get involved in HOA drama. She was right, of course. People had lives, jobs, kids. Attending a special HOA meeting to vote out the president was not high on most people's priority list. But maybe if enough people were fed up with Randy's behavior, they could be motivated. "What if I could get enough signatures on a petition?" I asked. "Show that there is real support for this." Linda looked at me thoughtfully. "If you could get, say, 40 or 50 homeowners to sign a petition calling for a vote of no confidence, that would be significant." The board would have to take it seriously. But Ethan, you need to understand something. Randy does not take challenges lightly. If you do this, he will make your life as difficult as he possibly can within his power as president. He already tried to steal my firewood. How much worse can it get? She smiled, but it was sad. You would be surprised. I left Linda's house with a plan forming in my mind. The next day, I drafted a petition. It stated that the undersigned residents of Pinecrest Estates requested a special meeting to hold a vote of no confidence in Randy Morrison's leadership as HOA president, citing abuse of power, harassment of residents through unjustified violation notices, and failure to follow proper HOA procedures. I printed 50 copies and started going door to door. The response was mixed. Some people signed immediately, grateful that someone was finally standing up to Randy. Others were sympathetic, but afraid of retaliation. A few told me directly that they did not want to get involved in neighborhood drama. But after 3 days of canvassing, I had 38 signatures. It was not quite the 40 or 50 Linda had suggested, but it was a majority of homes. I scanned the petition and sent it to all board members via email, along with a formal request for a special meeting to be held within 30 days per HOA bylaws. The reaction was swift and explosive. Randy called me that evening. I almost did not answer when I saw his name on the caller ID, but curiosity got the better of me. You have made a serious mistake, Randy said without preamble. His voice was tight with barely controlled anger. Going around to neighbors, spreading lies about me, trying to undermine the HOA. This is going to end badly for you. The only mistake I see is you trying to steal my firewood and then threatening me for calling you out on it, I replied calmly. 38 homeowners signed that petition, Randy. This is not just me. People are tired of your power trips. Those people do not understand the complexities of running an HOA. They do not see the work I put in to maintain property values and community standards. By threatening elderly couples over mailbox heights, by making up fake complaints to justify taking someone's property. That is not maintaining standards, Randy. That is harassment. I never made up complaints. Your woodpile is unsightly and residents have expressed concerns. Name one. Give me one name of someone who complained. Silence. That is what I thought, I continued. Here is what is going to happen. The board is going to schedule a special meeting per the bylaws. The residents are going to vote, and I am betting they are going to vote to remove you from the presidency. You can either accept that gracefully, or you can fight it and make things worse for yourself. You are going to regret this, Randy said and hung up. I stared at my phone for a moment after the call ended. Linda had been right. Randy was not going down without a fight. The next morning, I found a violation notice taped to my front door. According to the notice, my property was in violation of the following HOA rules: grass exceeding regulation height, unapproved exterior light fixtures, roof in need of cleaning, and unsightly material storage visible from neighboring properties. The last one was clearly the firewood again. The fine was $800, due within 14 days. I photographed the notice and checked each claimed violation. My grass was well within normal height. I had not changed any light fixtures since moving in 3 years ago. My roof was in perfect condition, and the firewood was no more visible now than it had been for years. Every single violation was bogus. I called Pete immediately and asked him to come over. When he arrived, I showed him the notice and asked him to look at my property objectively and tell me if he saw violations. Pete walked around my house, examining everything carefully. Your place looks great, man. Better than great. Your grass is fine, lights are standard fixtures, roof is clean. This is total garbage. He is retaliating. That is what I figured. Can you document this for me? Take pictures, maybe write a statement that you examined the property and found no violations. Absolutely. Pete pulled out his phone and spent the next 15 minutes photographing every angle of my property. He took close-ups of the grass, the lights, the roof, and the firewood pile. Then he sent everything to his email and mine, creating a timestamp. You should document the firewood pile too, Pete suggested. Get measurements of how far back it is from the property line and any sight lines from the street or other houses. Show that it is not visible the way Randy claims. We spent another hour doing exactly that. I measured distances, took photos from various angles, and even walked to neighboring properties to see what was visible from their yards. The woodpile was barely noticeable unless you specifically went to the back corner of my lot looking for it. Armed with this documentation, I drafted a response to the violation notice. I refuted each point with evidence, noted that the notice appeared to be retaliation for my petition, and stated that I would not be paying the fine. I sent it to all board members. Barbara Morrison responded within an hour. Violation notices issued by the HOA president are valid upon issuance. Failure to pay will result in additional fines and potential legal action. This was escalating fast. I needed legal advice. I called a real estate attorney in Asheville named David Park, who had been recommended by a colleague. His assistant scheduled me for a consultation the next day. David Park's office was in a professional building downtown, with a view of the mountains from his conference room. He was in his mid-40s, with dark hair graying at the temples and a sharp, analytical way of speaking. I laid out everything that had happened: the firewood theft, the petition, the retaliation violation notice. David listened carefully, taking notes. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. Okay, let me break this down for you. First, what Randy did taking your firewood without notice or proper procedure is theft, regardless of his position in the HOA. The fact that he tried to justify it after the fact with bylaw nonsense does not change that. You would be within your rights to file a police report. Would that actually go anywhere? Depends. Given that you got the wood back and there was no permanent loss, the police might view it as a civil matter, but it would create an official record of his behavior, which could be useful. What about the retaliation violations? David pulled out a copy of the Pinecrest Estates bylaws that I had sent him. HOA boards do have authority to issue violation notices and fines, but that authority is not unlimited. They have to act reasonably and in good faith. Issuing clearly bogus violations as retaliation for a resident exercising their rights under the bylaws, that is not good faith. That is harassment. So what can I do? Few things. 1. You can fight each violation individually. Submit your evidence, demand hearings, make them go through the full process for each one. It will be a pain for everyone, but it protects you. 2. You can continue with your vote of no confidence and hope the problem solves itself when Randy is removed. 3. You can take legal action against the HOA for harassment. What would legal action involve? You would file in civil court seeking an injunction against the HOA enforcing these violations and potentially seeking damages for harassment. The downside is it is expensive and time-consuming. Legal battles with HOAs can drag on for months or years. I rubbed my face, feeling the weight of all this. I had just wanted to stack firewood for winter. Now I was looking at potential lawsuits and ongoing battles. Here is my advice, David continued. Push forward with the vote of no confidence. Document everything Randy does in the meantime. If he continues with retaliation, you will have a strong case for harassment. And yes, file a police report about the firewood theft. Even if nothing comes of it criminally, it is one more piece of documentation. I paid for the consultation and left with a clearer picture of my options. On the way home, I stopped at the Asheville Police Department and filed a report about the firewood theft. The officer who took my statement was a middle-aged woman named Officer Stevens who looked skeptical at first, but became more interested as I explained the details. "So he is the HOA president, and he tried to take your firewood claiming it was a violation, but there is no actual bylaw about firewood storage," she confirmed. "That is correct. And when I confronted him, he put it back but threatened retaliation, which is now happening through bogus violation notices." Officer Stevens typed for a moment, then looked up. "I will be honest with you, Mr. Lancaster. This is probably going to be classified as a civil matter since the property was returned and there was no physical altercation. But I will file the report and it will be on record. If he comes onto your property again or if this escalates to threats or vandalism, call us immediately." "I will, thank you." Back home, I found another surprise waiting for me. Someone had scattered my woodpile, throwing pieces all over my backyard. It looked like a tornado had hit it. I stood there, rage building in my chest, and forced myself to take a breath before doing anything. First, I photographed everything. Every angle, multiple shots, timestamp visible. Then I called Officer Stevens and reported it. She said she would send an officer to document it, which happened about an hour later. The responding officer, a younger guy named Rodriguez, took more photos and asked questions. "Any cameras on your property?" he asked. "No." "I wish I had thought to install some. You might want to consider it. If this is part of an ongoing harassment situation, video evidence could be helpful." That was good advice. After Officer Rodriguez left, I drove to a home improvement store and bought a security camera system. Nothing fancy, just 4 cameras with motion detection and night vision that I could monitor from my phone. I spent the rest of the afternoon installing them, covering my front door, driveway, and both sides of the backyard, including the woodpile area. Then I spent 2 hours restacking the firewood. My back ached, my hands were sore, but I was not going to leave it scattered. That felt like giving up. Pete came over while I was working and helped with the last of it. "This is getting serious," he said. "Vandalism is a whole different level from violation notices." "I know, but I do not have proof Randy did it. Could have been anyone." "Come on, Ethan. Who else would it be?" He was right, of course, but suspecting and proving were 2 different things. The special meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks away, on a Monday evening at 7. Per the bylaws, notice had to be sent to all homeowners at least 10 days in advance. Barbara sent out the notice via email, but her framing was interesting. She described it as a meeting to address unfounded complaints against HOA leadership, rather than as a vote of no confidence. The bias was clear. I drafted my own email and sent it to everyone whose email address I could find, about 45 of the 70 homes. In it, I calmly laid out what had happened: the firewood theft, the retaliation, the pattern of harassment toward multiple residents. I attached copies of documentation, including photos of the scattered woodpile and the bogus violation notice. I ended by urging people to attend the meeting and vote their conscience. Response was mixed. Some people thanked me for standing up to Randy. Others told me to stop causing drama. One person accused me of trying to destroy the neighborhood. But enough people expressed support that I felt cautiously optimistic about the vote. The cameras I had installed proved their worth 3 days before the meeting. At 2 in the morning, motion detection alerted me to activity in my backyard. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed, my heart pounding. Someone in dark clothing and a ski mask was approaching my woodpile with what looked like a gas can. I watched in disbelief as they started pouring liquid over the wood. They were going to light it on fire. I called 911 while pulling on shoes and grabbing a flashlight. As I ran out my back door, I shouted at the top of my lungs, "I see you. The police are coming. I have you on camera." The figure jumped, dropped the gas can, and ran. They crashed through the trees at the back of my property and disappeared into the darkness. I chased to the edge of my lot but stopped there, not willing to pursue someone into the woods at night. Instead, I went to the woodpile and examined it. The top pieces were soaked with gasoline. The smell was overpowering. Another minute and my entire woodpile would have been ablaze, possibly spreading to nearby trees or even my house. Police arrived within 10 minutes. This time they took it very seriously. Officer Stevens was part of the response team, along with 3 other officers. They examined the scene, collected the gas can as evidence, and downloaded footage from my security cameras. The footage was not great. The person was completely covered, face hidden by a ski mask, dark clothing obscuring body shape. But it was clearly intentional arson, or at least attempted arson. The person had brought a gas can and poured it with obvious intent. "We will investigate this," Officer Stevens assured me. "This is a serious crime. Do you have any idea who might have done this?" I hesitated. I had strong suspicions, but I did not have proof. "There is an ongoing dispute with the HOA president. He has been harassing me. There is vandalism a few days ago and now this. But I cannot say definitively it was him." "What is his name?" "Randy Morrison. He lives at 847 Maple Ridge Court." Officer Stevens made a note. "We will pay him a visit." After the police left, I could not sleep. I sat on my back porch, watching the sky lighten toward dawn, thinking about how this had escalated so far beyond anything I could have imagined. All because I had caught someone stealing firewood. At 6 in the morning, my phone rang. It was Linda Patterson. "Ethan, I just heard what happened. Are you okay?" "How did you hear already?" "Police visited Randy at 4 in the morning. His wife called me, absolutely hysterical, saying Randy is being accused of attempted arson. Is that true?" "Did someone try to burn your house down?" "Not my house, my woodpile. But yes, someone poured gasoline on it. I have it on camera." "Oh my God. Ethan, this has gone too far. I am calling an emergency board meeting today. This needs to stop." "Linda, I appreciate that, but the special meeting is in 3 days. Can you just wait until then?" She was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? If Randy did this, he should be removed from the board immediately, not in 3 days." "I do not have proof it was Randy. The person was masked. If we act now without proof, he will claim it is a witch hunt. Let the police investigate. Let the scheduled meeting happen. If there is enough evidence before then, we can act. Otherwise, we stick to the plan." Linda agreed, though reluctantly. I spent the day dealing with the aftermath, giving another statement to police, and disposing of the gasoline-soaked firewood. I was not taking any chances with that being a fire hazard. That afternoon, I got a call from Officer Stevens. "Mr. Lancaster, I wanted to update you on the investigation. We interviewed Randy Morrison this morning. He denies any involvement and says he was home asleep at the time of the incident. His wife corroborates that. Of course she does. We asked if he would voluntarily provide fingerprints to compare against any we might find on the gas can, and he refused. That is his right, but it is noted. We also asked about his whereabouts for the previous vandalism incident, and again he claims he was home. No solid alibi for either incident. So what happens now? We keep investigating. We are checking stores in the area to see if we can find who purchased that particular gas can. It had some unique markings that might help. We are also asking neighbors if anyone saw anything. It is an active investigation. Thank you, officer. The next 2 days were tense. I barely left my house, constantly checking the security cameras. Randy did not contact me, which was somehow more unnerving than his previous angry phone calls. The silence felt ominous. Other neighbors started reaching out, though. Word had spread about the attempted arson, and people were shocked. Several who had been on the fence about the vote of no confidence told me they were now firmly on my side. Nobody wanted that kind of violence in their neighborhood. The evening of the special meeting arrived. It was being held at the Pinecrest Estates clubhouse, a small building near the development entrance used for community events. I arrived 15 minutes early and found that more than 20 people were already there. By 7 o'clock, the room was packed. I counted quickly and estimated over 50 residents present, far more than usually attended regular meetings. Randy sat at the front table with Barbara and Carl, looking grim. Linda sat at the far end of the table, deliberately separated from the others. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Randy called the meeting to order at 7 sharp. This special meeting has been called to address certain complaints and accusations against HOA leadership. Before we begin, I want to state clearly that these accusations are baseless and appear to be motivated by one resident's vendetta against proper community standards. Several people in the audience shifted uncomfortably. Margaret Riley, the elderly woman I had spoken to weeks ago, raised her hand. "Point of order," she said in a clear voice. "This meeting was called by petition of 38 residents, not one person. Let us be accurate about that." Randy's jaw tightened. "Fine. Multiple residents have been misled by false information. The purpose of this meeting is to clear up those misunderstandings." "Actually," Linda interjected, "the purpose of this meeting per the petition is to hold a vote of no confidence in your leadership as president. The bylaws are clear on this." "We need to discuss the issues first," Randy insisted. "The bylaws do not require discussion before a vote," Linda countered. "But if you want to allow comment, it should be open to all residents, not just your statement." Randy looked like he wanted to argue, but the room was full of people clearly on Linda's side. "Fine. Comments will be limited to 2 minutes each." Pete stood up. "I will go first. I have lived in Pinecrest Estates for 17 years. In that time, I have seen the HOA at its best and worst. The past 4 years under Randy's leadership have been the worst. He has turned our community into a police state of petty violations and harassment. This is not what an HOA should be." Barbara tried to interrupt, but Pete kept talking. "I am not done. 2 weeks ago, Ethan Lancaster caught Randy stealing firewood from his property. Stealing. When confronted, Randy made up a fake bylaw violation to justify it. That is not leadership, that is corruption." "That is a lie," Randy shouted, standing up. "I was confiscating materials per my authority as president." "Then show us the bylaw," Pete shot back. "Show us where it says you can take someone's property without notice." Randy sputtered but did not produce any bylaw. The room buzzed with conversation. Jennifer Hughes stood next. "I want to talk about the pattern here. In the past 6 months, Randy has issued violation notices to over a dozen homes. Most were for things so minor they are laughable. My house numbers were the wrong shade of bronze. The Riley's mailbox height. Someone's garden hose being visible. These are not legitimate concerns. They are power trips." One by one, residents stood and shared their experiences. A man named Marcus described being fined for putting up Christmas lights one day before December 1st, the official date approved by the HOA. A woman named Sharon talked about being threatened with fines because her kids' toys were visible in the yard. The stories kept coming. painting a picture of an HOA run by someone more interested in control than community. Randy tried to defend himself, claiming everything was by the book, but he was losing the room. Even Carl Stevens, who usually backed Randy automatically, looked uncomfortable. Then Linda stood. "I need to share something that happened this evening before the meeting." I received a call from the Asheville Police Department. They wanted me to know, as a board member, that their investigation into the attempted arson at Ethan Lancaster's property has developed significant leads. The room went silent. Everyone turned to look at me, then at Randy. Linda continued, her voice steady. "They declined to share details since the investigation is ongoing, but they indicated they expect to make an arrest soon. They wanted the board to be prepared for the possibility that the HOA president might be facing criminal charges." Randy's face went white. "This is ridiculous. I have not been charged with anything. This is slander." "It is not slander to relay information from the police," Linda said calmly, "and it is relevant to this vote. We need to consider whether Randy Morrison should continue leading this community." Barbara grabbed Randy's arm, whispering urgently to him. He shook his head violently, but she kept talking. Finally, Randy slumped in his chair, looking defeated. "Let us just vote," he said quietly. Linda nodded and explained the process. Each household got one vote. We would do a show of hands for simplicity. The question was simple. You support a vote of no confidence in Randy Morrison as HOA president? All in favor of no confidence, raise your hand. Hands shot up across the room. I raised mine, looking around. Pete, Jennifer, Margaret and Tom, Marcus, Sharon, and dozens of others. Linda counted carefully, writing down the number. 47 in favor, she announced. Opposed? Only 3 hands went up, Randy's, Barbara's, and Carl's. The motion passes. Randy Morrison is removed as HOA president effective immediately. The room erupted in conversation. Some people applauded. Randy sat frozen, staring at the table in front of him. Barbara was crying, though whether from anger or sadness I could not tell. Linda raised her voice to be heard over the noise. Per our bylaws, the vice president assumes the role of president when the position is vacated. Carl, that would be you. However, given the circumstances, if you would like to decline, we can hold nominations for a new president right now. Carl stood up, looking uncomfortable. "I appreciate the confidence, but I think we need fresh leadership. I will decline and support nominations." Several people were nominated. Linda kept order as we discussed each briefly. In the end, it came down to Margaret Riley and a man named Scott Henderson who had been active in community volunteer work. After a vote, Scott won by a narrow margin. Scott took his place at the head table, looking slightly overwhelmed but determined. "Thank you all for your trust. My first act as president is to rescind all violation notices issued in the past 6 months. We will start fresh with a focus on community, not punishment. Any legitimate issues will be addressed through proper channels with notice and due process." More applause. Randy finally stood and, without a word, walked out of the clubhouse. Barbara gathered papers frantically and rushed after him. I watched them go, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and sympathy. Randy had brought this on himself, but it was still a dramatic fall. The meeting continued for another hour as we discussed transition plans and immediate priorities. Linda agreed to stay on as secretary, and we voted in a new treasurer to replace Barbara. By 9 o'clock, Pinecrest Estates had completely new leadership. As people filed out, many stopped to shake my hand or pat my shoulder. Pete pulled me into a bear hug. "You did it, man. You actually did it." "We did it," I corrected. "I just caught a guy stealing firewood. Everyone else made the difference." That night I slept better than I had in weeks. The police made their arrest 3 days later. Officer Stevens called to let me know before it hit the news. "We got him on the attempted arson," she said. "Turns out that gas can had a unique serial number that we traced to a purchase at a hardware store in West Asheville." Security camera footage from the store showed Randy Morrison purchasing it the day before the incident. He paid cash, probably thinking that made it untraceable, but the serial number connection was solid. Combined with motive and opportunity, the DA felt confident filing charges. What charges exactly? Attempted arson and criminal trespassing. If convicted, he is looking at potential jail time. This is serious, Mr. Lancaster. I felt no joy at hearing this, only a kind of sad vindication. Randy had made choice after choice that led him here, and now he would face the consequences. The arrest made local news. Former HOA president arrested for attempted arson was not the kind of headline Pinecrest Estates wanted, but it was the truth. The story included details about the Firewood theft and the vote of no confidence, painting a picture of a man who had spiraled out of control over petty neighborhood disputes. Randy was arraigned and released on bail. His trial was set for March, 4 months away. His lawyer issued a statement saying Randy maintained his innocence and looked forward to clearing his name in court. But the evidence seemed pretty damning from where I stood. Life in Pinecrest Estates slowly returned to normal, or a new version of normal. Scott Henderson proved to be a thoughtful, reasonable HOA president. He focused on organizing community events and addressing actual maintenance concerns in common areas. The constant violation notices stopped. People relaxed. The Morrisons put their house up for sale in January. I felt a pang of something when I saw the sign go up. Barbara had been complicit in Randy's behavior, but she was also losing her home and community because of his actions. They moved out in February before the trial, relocating somewhere out of state according to neighborhood gossip. Randy's trial took place in mid-March at the Buncombe County Courthouse. I was called as a witness, along with several police officers. The trial lasted 3 days. Randy's defense argued that he had been at home when the attempted arson occurred and that his purchase of the gas can was coincidental, intended for his lawn mower. The prosecution methodically destroyed that defense. They showed that Randy's lawn mower was electric, requiring no gas. They presented the security camera footage from my property showing someone of Randy's height and build. They established motive through my testimony about the ongoing conflict. And they demonstrated that Randy had no solid alibi beyond his wife's testimony, which the jury was free to weigh against the other evidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning a guilty verdict on both counts: attempted arson and criminal trespassing. Randy showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just stared straight ahead with a blank expression. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge gave Randy 2 years in prison with possibility of parole after 18 months, plus 3 years probation, community service, and restitution to me for damages and emotional distress. The judge made clear in her comments that she viewed this as a serious abuse of a position of trust within the community. I attended the sentencing but said nothing. There was nothing to say. Randy had done this to himself through a series of increasingly bad decisions, all stemming from his need for control and his ego being bruised when someone stood up to him. Spring came to the Blue Ridge Mountains, beautiful and renewing. My firewood pile remained untouched, and I burned through it over the winter without incident. I installed a small shed to store next year's wood, just to be tidy about it, though nobody was complaining either way. Pete and I became better friends through all this. We started a tradition of Friday evening beers on one of our porches, talking about everything except HOA business. Jennifer Hughes organized a neighborhood barbecue in May that had the best turnout anyone could remember. Pinecrest Estates felt like a real community again. I never sought out conflict with Randy Morrison. I just wanted to heat my home during a North Carolina winter. But when he tried to steal from me and then justify it through manufactured authority, I could not let it stand. Sometimes standing up for yourself means standing up for your community too. The Firewood incident became a kind of legend in Pinecrest Estates, told with varying degrees of accuracy by residents to newcomers. "This is a good neighborhood now," people would say. "But let me tell you about the time our old president tried to steal someone's firewood and ended up in prison." And I would smile, shake my head, and think about how something so simple had spiraled into something so significant. All because I looked out my kitchen window at the right moment on a cold November morning and saw something that was not right. Justice had been served, the community had been healed, and my firewood remained exactly where it belonged.